The phone call came in at exactly 6:17 a.m. on Sunday, February 3, 2008. A teenager's voice, shaking, telling the dispatcher he'd just found his father's body. The operator stayed on the line as patrol units raced through the quiet streets of Caucasville, Maryland, an affluent suburb where the biggest crime stories usually involved stolen bicycles or vandalized mailboxes. What police discovered inside that beautiful colonial home would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, trust, and the masks we wear. 4 bodies. Each shot execution style while they slept. No forced entry. Nothing stolen. The only survivor was 15-year-old Michael, the eldest son who had made the call. This wasn't a random break-in gone wrong. This wasn't a robbery. This was something far more calculated, far more personal. The killer didn't need to break into this house. The killer already had a key. The killer knew exactly where everyone slept. The killer knew the family's routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. And here's what kept investigators awake at night. If you walked past this house just 24 hours earlier, you would have seen the picture of American success. A prominent attorney father, a devoted mother, 3 sons with bright futures ahead of them. Neighbors would tell you they were the kind of family everyone aspired to be. But perfection is often just another word for secrets well hidden. And in this house, someone had been hiding a secret so devastating, so consuming, that it would lead to one of the most shocking family annihilations in Maryland's history. The question wasn't who had the opportunity to commit these murders. The question was who had the motive to destroy an entire family. The answer would come from the last person anyone suspected. And when the truth finally emerged, it would reveal that sometimes the greatest danger to a family comes from within. To understand what happened in that house, you need to understand the world the Patterson family inhabited. Sherwood Road in Caucasville was exactly what suburban dreams are made of. Manicured lawns, luxury cars and driveways, children's bicycles leaning against garage doors. This was where successful people moved when they wanted to give their kids the best life possible. David Patterson, 45, was everything a community leader should be. As a successful attorney specializing in corporate law, he commanded respect in courtrooms and boardrooms alike. His colleagues described him as meticulous, demanding excellence from everyone around him, especially himself. At home, he applied those same standards. His wife, Sarah, 44, had dedicated her life to creating the perfect home environment. She managed the household schedules, supervised homework, coordinated extracurricular activities. Friends would later say she lived for her children's achievements, attending every game, every school event, every parent-teacher conference. Their 3 sons seemed destined for greatness. Michael, the eldest at 15, was an honor roll student at the local high school. Teachers praised his intelligence and work ethic. 14-year-old Daniel was the athlete, already drawing attention from high school scouts. 11-year-old Kevin was the artist, winning regional competitions for his drawings. From the outside, the Pattersons represented everything American families are supposed to achieve. But families are like houses. What you see from the street tells you nothing about what happens behind closed doors. The first crack in the perfect facade came from an unexpected source, Michael's own words. Classmates would later tell investigators that Michael had begun making disturbing comments about his family. Not the typical teenage complaints about strict parents or annoying siblings. Something darker. Something that made his friends uncomfortable. One student recalled Michael saying his parents would be better off dead. Another remembered him joking about what it would be like if his whole family disappeared. At the time, these seemed like the angry fantasies of a frustrated teenager. No one took them seriously. No one reported them. No one intervened. The pressure in the Patterson household was invisible to outsiders but suffocating to those within. David's expectations weren't just high, they were impossibly rigid. Perfect grades weren't enough. They had to be achieved in the right subjects, in the right way, with the right attitude. Failure wasn't just disappointing, it was shameful. Sarah, desperate to maintain harmony, became the enforcer of David's rules. Every aspect of the boys' lives was scheduled, monitored, evaluated. Free time was earned, not given. Privacy was a privilege that could be revoked. Individual expression was secondary to family reputation. For Michael, the oldest, the weight of these expectations had become unbearable. He was supposed to be the example for his younger brothers, the proof that the Patterson method worked. But instead of motivation, the pressure had created something else entirely. Something that had been growing in the shadows of that perfect home for months. On Friday, February 1, 2008, Michael made plans to spend the night at his best friend's house. It was a school night, which usually meant staying home, but for some reason, his parents agreed. His friend's mother would later remember Michael seeming distracted, almost disconnected from the typical teenage activities around him. What happened next would transform a typical Friday night sleepover into the prelude to one of the most shocking crimes in the community's history. But first, Michael had something he needed to do. Something he had been thinking about for a very long time. While his friend's family slept peacefully upstairs, Michael Patterson made a decision that would change everything. At 2:17 a.m. on Saturday, February 2nd, he quietly left the house and began the 3-mile walk home. It was a cold February night, the kind where your breath forms clouds in the darkness. But Michael wasn't thinking about the cold. He had his father's spare key. He knew exactly which stairs creaked and which ones were silent. He knew his parents' bedroom was at the end of the hall, that Daniel slept with his door slightly open, that Kevin was a heavy sleeper who wouldn't wake easily. This wasn't impulse. This was planning. The house was exactly as he'd left it hours earlier. His parents had gone to bed around 10:30, their usual time. Daniel and Kevin had been sent to their rooms by 9 o'clock for school the next day. The family's predictable routine, which had always felt like a prison to Michael, now became his advantage. David Patterson was asleep on the living room couch, something he did occasionally when he worked late and didn't want to wake Sarah. The television was still on, volume low, casting flickering light across his sleeping face. This was where Michael's plan began. Michael knew exactly where his father kept the gun. A Smith & Wesson .38 revolver, legally owned, stored in the bedroom closet for home protection. David had taught him about gun safety years earlier, believing it was important for his sons to understand firearms weren't toys. That knowledge would now be used in ways David never imagined. The first shot was fired at approximately 2:45 a.m. David Patterson never woke up. Michael then moved through the house with methodical precision, making his way upstairs to where his mother and brothers slept. Sarah Patterson died in her bed. She had been a light sleeper, always alert to her children's needs, but she never heard her eldest son approach. The shot that killed her was close range, execution style. There were no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds. She died believing her family was safe. Daniel, the 14-year-old athlete who had dreams of playing college sports, was killed next. Unlike his parents, Daniel began to stir as Michael entered his room. He raised his hand instinctively, perhaps recognizing his brother's silhouette, perhaps trying to shield himself. It made no difference. Kevin, the youngest, the artist who saw beauty in everything around him, was the last to die. At 11 years old, he was small for his age, innocent in ways his brothers had already outgrown. He never woke up. Michael shot him twice, just as he had the others. By 3:15 a.m., for members of the Patterson family were dead. Michael then did something that would later convince investigators this wasn't a crime of passion. He cleaned up. He wiped down surfaces, returned the gun to its hiding place, and made sure nothing appeared disturbed. Then he walked the 3 miles back to his friend's house, arriving before anyone noticed he was gone. For the next 30 hours, Michael maintained the perfect performance. He played video games with his friend. He ate meals prepared by his friend's mother. He participated in normal teenage activities as if nothing had changed, as if his entire family wasn't lying dead in their beds just 3 miles away. On Sunday evening, Michael finally returned home. He would later claim he had been dropped off by his friend's family, that he walked into his house expecting a normal Sunday night routine. Instead, he said, he discovered his father's body and immediately called 911. The 911 call lasted 12 minutes. Michael's voice was shaking, emotional, exactly what you'd expect from a teenager who had just discovered his father murdered. He told the dispatcher he was afraid to check on the rest of his family, that he didn't know if the killer was still in the house. When police arrived, they found exactly what Michael had described, a family destroyed by what appeared to be a targeted attack. The crime scene was clean, professional almost. No fingerprints where they shouldn't be. No signs of forced entry. No obvious motive. For 6 hours, Michael maintained his story. He was the grieving survivor, the son who had lost everything. He answered questions with appropriate emotion, provided details that seemed helpful to the investigation. He was, by all appearances, exactly what he claimed to be, the lucky one who survived because he wasn't home. But investigators had seen enough family annihilations to know the statistics. In cases where entire families are murdered with this level of precision, with no forced entry and no theft, the The killer is almost always someone with intimate knowledge of the victim's routines, someone with access, someone with motive. The first inconsistency was minor. Michael's description of his father's position didn't match the crime scene exactly. Then came the realization that the gun used was David's own weapon, fired by someone who knew exactly where to find it. Finally, there was the matter of timing. How did Michael know to come home at exactly the right moment to discover the bodies? When confronted with these inconsistencies, Michael's careful performance began to crack. The detectives, experienced in reading the signs of deception, pressed harder. They knew they were close to the truth. They just needed Michael to stop pretending and start confessing. At 11:47 p.m. on Sunday night, exactly 43 hours after he had murdered his family, Michael Patterson finally told the truth. And when he did, it revealed a level of premeditation and cold calculation that shocked even seasoned homicide investigators. The confession, captured on videotape, would become one of the most chilling documents in Maryland criminal history. Michael Patterson, speaking in a flat, emotionless voice, described the murders of his family with the same detachment most people reserve for discussing their grocery lists. He had been planning this for months, he told investigators. The pressure at home had become unbearable. His father's expectations, his mother's enforcement of impossible standards, the constant feeling that nothing he did would ever be good enough. But it wasn't just anger that drove him. It was a calculated decision that this was his only way out. The most disturbing aspect of Michael's confession wasn't the violence itself. It was the complete absence of remorse. When asked how he felt about killing his 11-year-old brother, Michael simply said Kevin would have grown up to be like them. When pressed about his mother, who had loved him unconditionally, he responded that she enabled his father's behavior. The psychological evaluation revealed a young man who had compartmentalized his emotions to an extraordinary degree. Dr. Sarah Chin, the forensic psychiatrist assigned to the case, would later testify that Michael showed classic signs of what she called familial displaced aggression, redirecting years of suppressed anger into a single, catastrophic act. But there was another element to this case that made it even more disturbing. In the weeks following Michael's arrest, investigators discovered he had been researching family annihilation cases online. His computer history showed searches for terms like how to get away with murder, family killer cases, and perfect crime scenarios. This wasn't a crime of passion or temporary insanity. This was a 15-year-old who had studied, planned, and executed the murder of his entire family with the methodical approach his father had taught him to apply to everything in life. The very perfectionism that had driven him to this breaking point had also made him chillingly effective at carrying it out. The community struggled to understand how they had missed the warning signs. In retrospect, Michael's comments about his family seemed obviously concerning. His increasing isolation, his declining performance in activities he once enjoyed, his flat emotional responses to family events. All of these should have been red flags. But this is the terrible truth about family violence. It often hides behind closed doors, masked by public personas and social expectations. The Patterson family's reputation for success had actually worked against them, making it nearly impossible for outsiders to recognize the dysfunction beneath the surface. On October 27, 2008, Michael Patterson pleaded guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. He was 16 years old, just 8 months past his 15th birthday, when he committed the crimes. The judge, faced with sentencing a teenager who had methodically destroyed his entire family, imposed 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The house on Sherwood Road was eventually sold, but it carried the weight of what had happened within its walls. New families moved in and moved out quickly, unable to escape the knowledge of the violence that had occurred there. Local real estate agents began referring to it as the house, no further explanation needed. In 2020, 12 years after the murders, Michael Patterson, now 27 years old, petitioned for a sentence modification. He argued that he had been a juvenile at the time of the crimes, that he deserved a chance at rehabilitation. His request was denied. The judge noted that the premeditated nature of the crimes and the complete absence of remorse made him unsuitable for early release. Today, Michael Patterson remains incarcerated at a maximum security facility. He has shown no interest in therapy, no acknowledgement of the devastating impact of his actions. In rare interviews, he continues to describe his crimes in clinical terms, as if discussing a problem he solved rather than lives he destroyed. The Patterson family murders serve as a horrific reminder that the people we trust most have the greatest power to harm us. They also raise uncomfortable questions about the pressure we place on our children, the expectations we create, and the warning signs we choose to ignore when they don't fit our image of the perfect family. For innocent people died because one teenager couldn't find another way to escape what he perceived as an impossible situation. Their deaths weren't just a personal tragedy. They were a community failure, a system breakdown, and a stark reminder that perfection is often just another word for secrets we're not brave enough to confront. If you or someone you know is struggling with family pressure, feeling trapped, or having thoughts of violence, please reach out for help. There are always alternatives, always other solutions, always people willing to listen and support you through the darkness. Because in the end, the perfect family isn't one without problems. It's one where problems can be discussed, where help can be asked for, and where love is stronger than the pressure to maintain appearances. The Patterson family never had that chance. Their story ends with empty bedrooms and unanswered questions, a reminder that sometimes the greatest tragedy is that it never had to happen at all. Some mysteries remain hidden, but not forever. Subscribe for more stories that will leave you questioning everything.